Today, we're going to be doing a 12-team pick-by-pick mock, and this is where QB scarcity really comes into play. So let's jump straight in. With the first pick, I'm going to go with Josh Allen, and then I think no matter what, you want to take the running backs up top here. So I'll go Gibbs, and then I'll go Bijan. At this point, you could go Jamar Chase, but I think we should maybe go a little bit heavier on the quarterbacks here up top, right? So let's go with Lamar Jackson. Matt and I both have him ranked as our quarterback 2. And then Drake May, who we both have ranked as our quarterback 3. And then I think we can go with Jamar Chase. Now going down to pick 8, this is probably where I'd go back in on quarterback. So let's look at the QBs here. And I think that Joe Burrow, even though he comes with some injury concerns, I do still have him as QB4. The next guy we go with is Jaden Daniels. And I think Daniels still has a ton of upside that we maybe didn't even see in his rookie year if he is able to continue to improve as a passer. So I'm really hoping going into his 3rd year that he can kind of re-break out and be that first-round quarterback that we know he can be. At this point now, I have Jalen Hurts as my next quarterback, but I do think we maybe start looking back at some of the other positions, and I think the next best player on the board is Jackson Smith-Njigba. And then I think now is the time where we want to go on Christian McCaffrey. Around the turn here now in your 12-team leagues, you cannot leave without a quarterback, so I'm going to take Jalen Hurts. Then the next player up is either between Jonathan Taylor, James Cook, or at receiver, you're looking at Amon-Ra St. Brown. I think he kind of stands above the rest of these guys at wide receiver. So for me, I think it's important to get one of these top 12 running backs. Jonathan Taylor, he easily could finish in that top group, especially if they win. And I know he has these huge splits between games they win, games they lose. I think that maybe is a little bit of a fluke, and I expect him to be very good this season. Going back around to Team 11, I think this is going to be a huge decision to make because Amon-Ra St. Brown, I really think he kind of stands above this group. James Cook, also very good at the running back position if you want to go running back up top. But if you don't take a quarterback here in your 12-team leagues, there is a very strong chance that you end up missing out entirely. So at this pick, I'm going to go with Caleb Williams, even though I feel like that maybe is a little bit of a reach. And maybe I would like to tempt going and waiting until the round 3. But I think at this point, you got your running back. Let's just get a quarterback and you can fill in your wide receivers later. Try and hit on some guys later in the draft. Same thing here with Team 10, right? You're looking at Amon-Ra, you're looking at James Cook. But I do think that these quarterbacks here are going to be better than what you might be looking at in quarterback 15 or 16 if you wait. So let's go in on Dak Prescott, the guy I have ranked next after Caleb Williams. And then these guys are going to get a little bit of a gift here. They already picked their quarterbacks, and so I'm going to go with Amon-Ra St. Brown first. And then next, we're going to go with James Cook. That feels like a steal here down at the 5th pick of round 2. So looking down at the quarterbacks, now I really, really like Justin Herbert above the rest of these guys. I think that this is going to be a very strong pick here, and there's going to be some urgency behind Team 7. I bet that they're looking up the board, hoping that Herbert is the one that falls because they don't have their quarterback yet. And similar to that, I do think that Jared Goff is somebody that provides an insane amount of stability in your Superflex leagues. He always plays. He's always in the top 10. And in 12-team Superflex, there's just so much to be said for that. And I think is an excellent mid-second round pick for these leagues that go super heavy on quarterback. Looking down to the team with Drake May now, we're going to go with CeeDee Lamb. Team 4 here now with Lamar Jackson. This is tempting to go with another quarterback here. I do really like Brock Purdy and think he's, maybe a little bit better than the rest of these guys. Trevor Lawrence, Jackson Dart also in consideration here. You see that 2 teams need a quarterback. And so if you're looking to go QB at this point, I think that this part of the draft is where it makes sense to double up. So I'm going to go with Brock Purdy here. I think going quarterback always comes with a ton of risk because you're leaving out so much skill position talent. But again, we're going a little bit heavier on quarterback, and I think at least one team should double up on quarterback, and let's see how that team turns out. Team 3 now, they're definitely feeling the heat at quarterback, but I think we're kind of to the point in the draft where there's a lot of sameness here in terms of these top 5 guys. So let's go ahead and take a wide receiver here. Let's go with Justin Jefferson. I think as long as Kyler is half decent, that Jefferson is going to go right back to being an elite player. And with the Gibbs team, A.J. Brown is my next wide receiver up. Drake London's quarterback situation is still kind of up in the air. It makes me a little bit hesitant to pick him. I do really like Nico Collins as well, but I think A.J. Brown is set to reassume an alpha wide receiver role with an excellent quarterback. So we're going to go with Saquon Barkley here for this pick. And then wide receiver we're going to go with is Nico Collins. Again, I talked about the reservations I have with Drake London. And also, I just think that Nico has a chance to be awesome. No Jaden Higgins. They bring in Kayshawn Booty to kind of replace that role. So Nico should be able to continue to move around the formation. He's not going to get stuck only on the outside. And I think he's poised to have a huge year. And that works out for team 2 because he waited on quarterback and now gets his pick of this group right here. The guy I have ranked the highest is Trevor Lawrence. I have been down on Trevor Lawrence in the past, but I do think he finally showed what we were hoping to see, a top 5 finish at quarterback, stayed healthy all year. I know a lot of it came with rushing at the end of the year. Will he repeat that? Probably not. But we did see Liam Cohen really kind of ascend his game and show that he has upside to finish as a top 10 quarterback. So I'm finally at a point where I'm going to be okay drafting him pretty aggressively. And then team 3, again, needs a quarterback badly. And so let's look at the position. And I have Matthew Stafford ranked as the next quarterback. Obviously, he was a top 5 quarterback last year. He's not going to repeat the touchdowns, but he could easily have a monster season again. The weapons are the same. The offense is the same. And I think that they're going to continue to push the ball, even though they're going to have an excellent defense. I think they're going to be looking to put up a ton of points again this year. Team 4 has a lot of players here now available to him. And I feel like a lot of these guys fell into his lap quite a bit with the running back position. At wide receiver, it actually is thinned out quite a bit. So I'm not as keen on this position right now. I think there's going to be a lot of running backs going here. So let's go with Devon Achane. Next up, Chase Brown kind of falls into this team's lap. And this team also needs a running back very badly. So let's take a look. Omarion Hampton, somebody that I really like this year, Chargers homer, obviously. And I think he's going to have all the upside in the world. I think of this group of running backs that I just took around this turn, that Hampton has the most upside of any of them. And again, this team does not have a running back either. So we're going to see running back continue to fly off the board here as the top 12 kind of get consumed here. So Kenneth Walker is the next guy I have up. I do think going to Kansas City obviously is going to help him a ton. But my biggest reservation with Walker is that he's been hurt in the past. And if he is given this huge workload and 3-down workhorse role, how well will he hold up to that kind of workload? And this team needing a wide receiver 1, I think is a great spot for London. Again, falls super late in this draft just because of the urgency I feel at running back and a lot of quarterbacks going early. Next guy up is going to feel very fortunate to get Derrick Henry. So let's look back at the quarterback position because we've now gone a handful of picks, and I think this is becoming more and more of a value. And so the next guy I have up is Patrick Mahomes. I do think even with the injury and coming off an ACL tear, that he's still going to be very productive this year. Will he run as much? No, but he was quarterback 2 with all of that rushing. And so is there a happy medium between that and where he's getting picked here? I think that can be the case. Team 11 here is going to look at the wide receiver position. I feel like there's a ton of value going on right here. Malik Nagers is my next guy up. Obviously, he's coming off an ACL tear of his own, but he shed the red jersey in practice. I think he's going to be ready to go for week 1. And if he is truly healthy, at that point, we know that he can be a top 5 wide receiver, no problem. So get around the turn here as well. We're going to take a look back at the running back position. Still not entirely sold on a lot of these guys. So let's go in on receiver here. I've got Chris Olave ranked as the next highest receiver. I really like him this year with Shuck, and I think that he has an opportunity to repeat his wide receiver 6 season, and he's going much later than that. If Shuck is actually good, we saw flashes of it down the stretch last year, but if he comes in and is firing on all cylinders starting in week 1, I think Olave's ceiling is through the roof. And then since it is round 4, and again, there's a huge gap in the number of picks you can get here, I think we're going to go back to the quarterback position and take Jackson Dart. He's kind of the last guy in that tier of quarterbacks, in my opinion. So I think that's an excellent spot to be able to get him. And again, if you have these quarterbacks in a different order than I do, you can just picture him going, in one of these other slots and say it's Mahomes that falls there or Stafford that falls there. And if all the quarterbacks get consumed, right, then he gets Drake London, say, or Derrick Henry. Still a very good spot to be in. A lot of very good players that could be there. And you just have to construct your team a little bit differently. All right, so circling back around here to team 11, the door is wide open. He's got one of every single player. And I think this is the point in the draft where we could see the tight ends go a little bit here, right? So that's where we're going to start considering them. Wide receiver still has George Pickens, Rashee Rice, Tedero McMillan. I think that's still a very strong position, and running back still is just not very attractive to me against the other 3 positions right now. So I think it's either going to boil it down to George Pickens or to Brock Bowers. And so let's take Brock Bowers here with this pick. I think getting an edge at tight end makes sense at this point in the draft. Might be a little bit early for 3 wide receiver and super flex because the tight end value does get depressed in that format a lot because there's just so many starters. So it's not so critical to get an edge at tight end. But I think in this case, in round 4, this is a good time for it to happen. And this team needs a running back pretty badly. So let's look back at the running back position. I do currently have Josh Jacobs pushed up to running back 13. So let's go ahead and lock him in as this team's running back 1. And for this team, let's look back at the quarterback position. I think Bo Nix, I have as quarterback 16. I think he can be very productive, and it's a great time to get in on a second quarterback. You got your wide receiver, your running back. You can kind of fill in those positions. You get a good second quarterback here. And team 8 is going to also be looking at the quarterback position. The next guy I have up is Baker Mayfield. Next team is going to go and look at the wide receiver position. I think George Pickens has fallen far enough. Good thing the Lamb team didn't have to make that decision, but this feels like an excellent start. As an example, if you don't go quarterback early, but you lock in one in the second round, of what sort of value could potentially fall to you if quarterbacks do continue to go very, very quickly, and you're somebody who likes those later group of quarterbacks, is going to be okay with a Sam Darnold, or is going to be okay with Malik Willis as your number 2. You can create a build like this and really get some value here in round 4. All right, and with this team, I think we're going to go Trey McBride. I think it's a good time to scoop up Rashid Rice at this point, my wide receiver 13 there, and obviously he can exceed that in a major way. Team 4 needs a wide receiver very badly, so we're going to pull up that list and we're going to go with Devontae Smith. With team 3 here, I do think that they might be looking at how the other teams are constructed, could see quarterbacks going to those teams, especially around that 3-4 turn with 4 picks there. So I'm going to go ahead and lock in Tyler Shuck, the quarterback that I have ranked highest of that group. I mentioned it with Olave. I do think that there's a situation where he takes a step forward and is excellent this season. Down the stretch, he was averaging close to 20 points a game, never really had anything below 18 as a starter. And so if he kind of parlays that into this season, I think he has a chance to end up as a top 15 quarterback at the very least. And I think he has upside to get inside the top 10. So really, really like Tyler Shuck. And I think that's a good pick here because around the corner, I think multiple quarterbacks are going to go. So at this point in the draft, let's go ahead and take a shot with Ashton Genty. If he's okay, then this is going to be a huge, huge win. If he's not, this is going to be a huge, huge loss. But at this point, if you're drafting now and he falls here, it's going to be really hard to pass on him. And that probably applies to the entire round here. It just depends on your tolerance for risk. And if you want to take the chance on him not being okay for, the first 2 months of the season, that wouldn't be this would be kind of a sunk pick at that point. But if not, I think it could work out in a huge way, especially if he only misses the first couple games and ends up being okay. One of these picks is for sure going to get a quarterback. So let's look at the board here. I do really like Jordan Love as well. So I think I'm going to go with Love first. Very stable role. And in Superflex leagues, that's a huge deal, right? You want to be making sure that you pick the guys that are actually locked into situations when you can, especially this late in the draft. And then looking at the other positions, let's lock in Zay Flowers here. He did break out in a pretty big way last year, right? Their passing numbers in Baltimore were way down, but he still had 1,250 yards and 5 touchdowns. If they do throw the ball more and he maintains the role that he had last year and the target share that he had last year, I think we could see a huge breakout in the yardage. Whether or not he gets the touchdowns, I think is up in the air. Going back to team 2, we need to lock in that last quarterback for him. All right, now that this team has the quarterbacks, I think it can kind of go in any which way. So I do like Ladd McConkey here, but I do think it's maybe time to go in on Colston Loveland. I think the receiver pool is going to get very deep in a 3 wide receiver 12 team league, but I do think that Loveland could potentially be the number 1 target earner on Chicago's offense, and that carries a huge amount of upside that some of these other wide receivers maybe just don't quite have, and you get to play him at tight end. So I like that a lot. This team is going to go with Ladd McConkey. Running backs have gone too long now without getting picked, so let's go with Jeremiah Love here. I know he's coming off a high ankle sprain, but I think the talent could shine through by the second half of the season, so he might get off to a slow start, but could really, really be a league winner for you down the stretch. Next wide receiver up is Garrett Wilson. I think he's kind of the final guy that I'm very comfortable with here with T. Higgins, so let's take those 2 guys off. Egbuka, Burden, both hurt. Jalen Waddle, I like a lot. But I think that these two are a little bit ahead of Waddle, in my opinion, just because Waddle's changing teams. Obviously, he could be excellent, but I think there's a little bit of risk that comes with that. We don't know what the dynamic's going to be between him and Cortland Sutton. And Bo Nix has not exactly been a high passing producer, right? He's never thrown for 4,000 yards. So there's at least a little bit of questions there with Jalen Waddle. He did look very fast in the preseason game, though. So if you do like Waddle, I don't blame you at all for taking him here. This team is going to go quarterback with their next pick. So let's go ahead and lock in Kyron Williams for them here. Should be very productive as well. Lots of touchdowns. He's just always been good. I don't think you need to overcomplicate the Kyron pick. We're going to go back to back position skill players here. So let's lock in Javonte Williams, and at receiver, we're going to lock in Jalen Waddle. This team needs a quarterback, so there's no shot they're going to let him fall any further than that. And depending on what you think here of this group, CJ Stroud maybe provides a little bit more safety. Fernando Mendoza at this point in the draft, when you don't have a second quarterback, is risky, but overall could be very good if he gets the role early in the year. So that's something that, maybe you end up picking Kirk at the end of the draft and just start him until Mendoza's ready, and that's your QB2. But I do think Daniel Jones has quite a bit of upside here and is going to be a pretty solid contributor. So if you wait until round 6, I think he's a very solid target for your QB2. All right, let's fly some more of these players on the board here. You've got Breece Hall, has a groin injury, but I think should be fine for the start of the year. Let's look back at the tight end position. Let's go ahead and take Tyler Warren. Good value. Again, he's hurt as well, but is expected back in short order. I think he's going to be ready to go for week 1. This team needs a receiver very badly. So let's look at the receivers. I want to pick Emeka Egbuka here, and maybe I'll do that, but I do want to highlight the caution that you need to take here. We did not really get specific information on what his injury actually was. They were kind of cagey. They didn't call it turf toe. And so maybe it's not nearly as severe as that, and he's going to be fine. But if he has turf toe, he's going to be struggling to get on the field for week 1. And he was wearing a brace on it. He hasn't been practicing at all. And so I'm going to hopefully trust that since they didn't call it turf toe, that it's actually a different injury on the toe, and he's going to be okay for week 1. So that's why he falls here. If I knew he was okay, I'd put him up here ahead of Ladd McConkey or right in this Ladd McConkey range. So that's where I would take him. If you're not worried about the injury at all, go ahead and take him up that high. This team needs another quarterback. So let's look at what's left. He's going to go with CJ Stroud. He's probably running that pick to the board. Very, very happy that CJ Stroud was available. Now, the other thing you could be saying here is that, these teams all have quarterbacks already. There's no way they would pick Stroud. You might be right. But we saw it in our draft in our home league that we kind of had a similar situation, and somebody ended up sniping another quarterback. So if you have conviction there on the quarterback that you want, go and take him. If you have 3 guys, 4 guys that you're fine with, then maybe you don't have to take a quarterback there because everybody has 2 quarterbacks already. But just something to think about strategy wise that you see when you're in the middle of the draft. If you're on one of the ends too, definitely don't wait. But in the middle of the draft, you might be able to get away with it a little bit more. Looking down the board here, we've got Bucky, DeAndre Swift, Judkins, Montgomery. Swift, obviously, highest of the group. If that's not obvious for you, I think you need to update your rankings. He's an excellent value. I think there's an argument that he could have gone even as high as Jordan Love. With Monongai's injury and with how good we expect this offense to be, he could be uniquely set up to explode in a way that we haven't seen from him at all. So I do really like Swift this year. This team also needs a running back, but could use a flex, tight end. But let's go with a running back here for them as well. Next guy up that I have ranked is David Montgomery. I understand that there's some 50-50 split talk between him and Woody Marks. I think it's a little bit overblown. They might be talking about 50-50 snaps. I could see the 50-50 snap share because Woody Marks is going to be playing on all third downs. So if he plays on third downs and then in the 2-minute drill and sometimes in the 4-minute drill, yeah, maybe their snaps end up being 50-50. But in terms of touches, there's just no way that's going to happen. Montgomery's going to work on the goal line. He's going to be predominantly on early downs, and he's a solid pass catcher. So he's not just going to be completely omitted from the passing game. Montgomery's a great pick. This team needs all kinds of help everywhere. So let's take a look back at receiver. Luther Burden, Devontae Adams, Terry McLaurin, Jameson Williams. I like Devontae Adams best of that group right now. There's a lot of hype around Luther Burden, but just the fact that he got injured when he really needed this time to kind of establish himself as the go-to option in the Bears offense, I think is going to hold him back early in the year. But that's just over Davante Adams. I still really like him as a player because this team also needs a receiver. So let's see what we think here. And this is where I think, you could go with DJ Moore, Terry McLaurin, or Burden, but let's go ahead and lock Burden in here way after Davante Adams. This team really needs a running back. So let's look at the running back position. Cam Scatterbo, Quinshon Judkins, Bashal Tutin. So I do have Judkins ranked the highest of that group. I think he has the safest role to volume. And there's something to be said for the rest of the running backs here. Cam Scatterbo, I mean, that's a weird situation with the Giants right now. They bring in Najee Harris. Tyrone Tracy, is he even going to play? Singletary has been getting first team snaps. So that situation seems very murky right now at the very least. It seems like Scatterbo should just have his role, but I'm just not sure. Bucky Irving, I'm worried a little bit about him becoming a trap back. I think Sean Tucker might work on the goal line and Gainwell might work in passing game, and that would leave Bucky for between the 20s, between the 10s on early downs. We've never really seen him used like that. He's always been the workhorse when he's been healthy, ever since taking that role from Rachaad White. But the uncertainty around him kind of makes me a little uneasy against Quinshon Judkins, where we clearly know what his role is going to be. This team also needs a receiver, so let's go with DJ Moore here. Take a peek at tight end just in case. I don't think at this point you need to go in on tight end. I think Sam Laporta is probably going to be hurt going into the year. Kraft, we know, is going to be limited snaps, even though that's probably who I would take here. So I'm good passing on tight end. This team also needs another receiver pretty badly and actually needs a running back with Genty. So we probably should go in on a running back here. And my next highest ranked running back is Cam Scatterbo. This team really badly needs a running back. So let's go ahead and look at that position. Again, for this player, let's go with Bucky Irving. And this team could go any which way, right? So you look at how this turned out with the two quarterbacks up top. I actually really like how this team turned out. I think Devontae Smith is an excellent player. Obviously, McConkey, we expect a huge bounce back here. And getting David Montgomery as your second running back is still very solid. And you end up with Lamar and Purdy as your two quarterbacks. This team could be set up to be very, very good. So at running back, let's go ahead and take Bashal Tutin. Running back is falling apart pretty quickly at the position. I think there's more wide receiver value to be had late, so we can kind of figure out the third wide receiver after that. Tutin will be in flex. Terry McLaurin, next wide receiver I have ranked. This team needs a running back, only one running back, so let's go with Jaren Price. Let's look at tight end again here. Maybe we go in on Sam Laporta here finally, or Tucker Kraft. Actually, let's go with Tucker Kraft. This team needs another receiver. Let's check in on that position. I think Jameson Williams fits the bill as a solid wide receiver 3. He's a little bit boom bust, but he can also produce like a mid-tier wide receiver 2 is, on average, even though it's going to be a lot of huge weeks and a lot of zeros. So I like him more as a wide receiver 3. I think it fits the profile pretty well. This team needs a running back very badly. It only has one. And this is where you do not want to get caught at running back if you can avoid it. So let's look at how this team was constructed here. So the Jaylen Warren pick maybe should have gone with running back here. There was Etienne, Swift, Montgomery still on the board. And I would much rather have done that knowing which running backs came back, because you see how many running backs we end up taking between those picks. So if you're here, mock that out, look at how your league drafts, and make sure that, it's not necessarily a mistake. Warren's going to be a great player, but this is why tight ends also get pushed down in these type of deep starting lineup formats, because you just can't afford to miss on this tier of running back and end up starting a running back like Trevion Henderson. I think that's kind of, we'll take him just because he has a lot of upside, but that's kind of a situation where you don't want to end up in. This team needs a wide receiver, so let's go ahead and go with Rome Odunze. We both really like Odunze as a third wide receiver. I think he's going to be the number one wide receiver on the team, at least to start the year until Burden gets caught up after his injury. And so he could potentially get off to a huge start. We saw him get off to a huge start last year. Hopefully he's able to sustain that and be healthy this season. This team really needs wide receiver help. Only Malik Neighbors on the team. So we're going to be going wide receiver around the turn. Let's go with Christian Watson. I think he has a ton of upside in that Packers offense. Again, another guy that you really just hope is going to stay healthy. This team needs wide receiver and flex and tight end. So let's go ahead and take Mike Evans here. I know he's dealing with a little bit of an injury to his quad, but hopefully can kind of work his way through it, work his way out of it. This team, if they don't go tight end, is likely going to miss out. So let's go with Sam Laporta. This team needs another receiver badly here. So we're going to go with Parker Washington. Obviously, one of the most hyped players. My issue with him, well, obviously, if he was hyped, he'd be going much earlier than this. My biggest issue with Parker Washington is, unfortunately, even if he is the number one, what exactly does that look like in the Jacksonville offense? They still have 4 wide receivers that are probably going to be getting on the field with relative consistency in Parker Washington, Brian Thomas Jr., Jacoby Myers, and Travis Hunter. And I feel like people forget about Travis Hunter. And even if he's on the field 35% of the time, even if he's only getting 3 or 4 targets a game, that still caps the upside of a potential number one wide receiver like Parker Washington, especially if he's playing a similar or same position and is going to be on the field that frequently. Now, I could be wrong and he could just not play wide receiver at all, but it seems like it would be interesting to not have somebody that talented that's on your roster play the wide receiver position at all. So that's why I'm a little bit hesitant on Parker Washington, but I do still think he's an excellent pick. This team's still looking for flex players, so let's look at the running backs. I think Tony Pollard. No, let's go with Jaylen Warren. And then I alluded to it here, but let's take Tony Pollard with this pick. Pollard obviously expected to be the starter, so I think it's a fine pick at this point. Tight end probably needs to go to this team here. You look at the tight ends here, and it's just really not that great. But let's take George Kittle. If he's right, I think that's going to be a very good pick. Now, that's obviously the biggest question. A 31-year-old coming off an Achilles tear. Very quick recovery, but he is looking good, looking like he might be on the field for week 1 anyways. If he's fully ready, I doubt that, but that could be a great pick here. This team needs wide receiver help badly here. So let's go with the rookie, Carnell Tate. Give him some upside at that wide receiver 3 spot. If he is actually going to be the number 1 on Tennessee, I think that could be a great pick. This team also needs wide receiver help quite a bit as well. Let's go with Brian Thomas Jr. We've seen the upside there. You obviously know this channel likes him a lot as a player. This team can go any which way here, and I think let's go with the tight end position as well. Kelsey, you know that I like, but let's go with Fannin. I think that he can be the number 1 target earner on this team. With Deshaun Watson, he doesn't really target the tight end historically, but Fannin is kind of the best pass catcher they have right now. And maybe that turns into Denzel Boston. Maybe that turns into Casey Concepcion. But for the start of the season, it should be Fannin. Hopefully the quarterback doesn't hold him back too much. This team can go any which way as well. So I think let's go with wide receiver here. And I think Marvin Harrison is a good fit for this team, just getting a 3rd wide receiver, taking some upside at this point in the draft. I took Marvin Harrison in our home league, so maybe I'm a little biased with that pick. This next team also needs wide receiver help badly as well. So let's look down the board. Let's go with Chris Godwin here. I think if Egbuka isn't right, Godwin can at least get this team off to a hot start. Maybe Godwin gets settled in early and it ends up being a pretty good value at this point. He hasn't been healthy in so long, it feels like. He's only 30 years old. And if he actually is right going into this season, this could be somebody that ends up being a huge value at this point in the draft. This team also in need of wide receiver. Wow, looks like I drafted these teams relatively similar at this point in the draft. But Courtland Sutton, mentioned him when I was talking about Jalen Waddle. I think we don't really know what his role is going to be. But it seems as though the other wide receivers are going to be condensed into Waddle, and Sutton is going to be able to continue to be the same or similar in his role. Maybe he sees a few less targets, but he was still very productive last year, finished as wide receiver 11 in half PPR leagues. So will he do that? Probably not. But at this point, I think the player is definitely talented enough to justify the pick. Let's take a tight end here with this pick to start. Let's go with Kyle Pitts. Could also use another running back. So let's go with Ramondre Stevenson here. I think that's a strong pick. I don't expect Travion Henderson to take a ton of work from him early in the year. I do hope that changes eventually, but as of right now, Stevenson is the starter. This team also needs a tight end, so let's take a look there and let's lock in Kelsey. Team also needs a tight end, so let's look at that position here. We don't necessarily need to fill it in right away, but I think Isaiah Likely is worth it at this point. Don't want to end up with somebody else there, just because if you look at the tight end position, I really do not like the rest of these players here. I really would be very concerned if I did not get Likely. And so I know there's only one other team that needs a tight end, but locking him up there, I think, is worth the pick. This team needs a running back. So let's finally take RJ Harvey off the board. He had 12 touchdowns last year. I think he can be productive near the goal line. We saw him score on a wheel route in the preseason game. I'm not sure exactly what the split is going to be because we didn't see J.K. Dobbins come back last year, and Harvey was excellent down the stretch as a fantasy player. Didn't run the ball particularly well, so if Dobbins is back, you would have to think that he would be running on early downs significantly more than Harvey. I just hope that Harvey is able to get more than the 6-7 touches he was getting at the beginning of last year, because that would be a disaster. Again, this team needs a running back as well, so let's go with Rico Dowdle. Mentioned him when we were talking about Warren, should be the running down back for Pittsburgh. This team also needs a running back, so let's take a look back at that position as well. And one of the guys I mentioned is a guy I cannot stop drafting is Jordan Mason. I think that's a very good pick. I think he's going to be an early down rusher. Aaron Jones obviously has the upside to do a lot in the passing game. I just don't think he's going to get a lot of touches. This team also needs a running back quite badly with only 2 on their roster at this point. And I think we could take J.K. Dobbins. Again, just mentioned him with R.J. Harvey should be running on early downs. So was scoring a lot of touchdowns, getting a lot of touches, very much worth a start at the beginning of last year. And so that's a good flex player to be able to throw in this deep of a roster. This team needs a wide receiver. So we're going to be looking at that position. I think Michael Wilson has hung around long enough here. We saw what he can do when he's the number one. It's just, I think the role is up in the air quite a bit right now. We just don't really know how he's going to fit in. And he was not really productive last year when Marvin Harrison Jr. was on the field. So I think there's a little bit of that needs to be fleshed out in camp, and how those two are going to coexist, I guess, I think is the biggest question mark in Arizona. This team needs a tight end, but we can at least wait because nobody else is going to double up on tight end. And so at the running back position, we're going to go in on Ja'Cory Crosby-Merritt, another early down running back. They've been using him a little bit more in the passing game, it seems like, in camp. So I think it's interesting to see that he might kind of just assume a lead back role, and that might not work out that well, but at least they're trying to give him the opportunity to do it. So I think he's a good pick this late in the draft. No running back needed for this team's roster as well. And going back to back with Ja'Cory Crosby-Merritt is Rachaad White. That's the other guy. He should be working on passing downs, and I was kind of hoping he was going to take over more of the early downs role once we got into camp, but it just doesn't seem like that's been happening. I still think there's the upside for that to be the case, but I think at this point, again, we can assume he's going to have the passing down role. And so if he's working on third down, I would guess that Jaden Daniels is going to make a concerted effort to get him the ball. This team needs a running back and a receiver probably. So let's go with Blake Corum. Obviously the most valuable handcuff, but he should have a role to himself as well. And then let's take another receiver for this team. There's so many hurt guys here now too, with Tyson and Pierce that were interesting earlier in the offseason, but I think DK Metcalf has fallen far enough here, can provide some stability at the position. This team still needs a wide receiver decently badly, so let's look back at the position and take Jordan Addison. Again, we talked about Kyler and his ability to stay in the role. If he can, I think Addison should be at least productive enough to justify a pick like this, and we've seen clips come out of camp where Kyler and Addison have pretty good chemistry. So hopefully that works out for Kyler and for Addison. This team needs a tight end now. I do not like these tight ends that are available very much at all. I think the guy that I would have ranked the highest is Dallas Goedert. We did see him at least score a lot of touchdowns last year. So maybe he can get off to a hot start on the goal line again this year. It is a new offense though, so I'm not exactly sure how he's going to be used. There is no A.J. Brown though. So if Mekhi Lemon doesn't get all the way caught up, Dallas Goedert could be the number 2 option in the passing game to start the year, could get you off to a hot start at the tight end position. I think we're going to go with another wide receiver at this pick. Looking at Jaden Reed, looking at Michael Pittman, looking at Josh Downs. I think Downs is the move here. Next guy up, let's go with Jaden Reed. Another guy that's super efficient when he's on the field. We just don't know what his snap share is going to look like. Another wide receiver for this team going to come off the board here as well. Let's go with Michael Pittman. Could be a good, pretty high target earner on this Pittsburgh offense. Now, DK has been getting the targets in camp because Pittman has been missing time, but I think that could change once the season starts because Pittman did have a pretty good season last year. He was wide receiver 22 on the Colts, and I understand the change in offense, less passing, but hopefully Pittman can still be productive. Let's get back at the running back position now. There's not a lot of running backs at this point in the draft that I like very much, but let's go on Aaron Jones. Mentioned him when we took Jordan Mason that he could still be productive in the passing game. If anything were to happen to Mason, I'm guessing they could lean on Jones for a couple weeks to take on a bigger role. So there is a little bit of handcuff appeal there for him as well. This team needs a wide receiver. So let's go ahead and look down the board a little bit and take Stephon Diggs. Mentioned him when we took Jaden Daniels up at the top, but hopefully he can be productive this season and is in a good situation. I mean, we're kind of getting excited about Brandon Ayuk a little bit for fantasy. Like he might actually have some fantasy life if he did get that second role, and that role ended up going to Diggs. So as long as Jaden Daniels is healthy, he's going to be relatively productive and probably worth owning in all leagues. Another guy at the wide receiver position is Wan'Dale Robinson. So let's go ahead and lock him in. Should be good, especially to start the year. If I had Tate, I wouldn't necessarily be looking to pick him, but I could see a situation where Wan'Dale is by far the most targeted receiver through the first month of the season for Tennessee, and that could definitely lead to some flex appeal from him. This team definitely needs another wide receiver as well, so let's scroll down the board here and let's look to Matthew Golden. Another wide receiver coming off the board. Let's take Jordan Tyson here. I think it's been long enough at this point where he can present some upside. This is your first bench player, so he's not going into your starting lineup, so I can understand that. And on that same mold, let's go with Alec Pierce. Obviously hurt, a very uncertain situation, but in round 10, he could provide a lot of upside to your team later in the season. And if you can put him on an IR spot, especially, I think that makes that pick all the more valuable. All right. And looking over some of these teams quickly before we sign off here, Team Full, I think, turned out very good for what we ended up doing with two quarterbacks up top. You got H.N. Montgomery and Tootin, Smith, McConkey, and Marvin Harrison with Likely. Obviously, doing that, you see how we waited on tight end all the way until the end, like the second to last team to pick a tight end. When you get behind the eight ball in terms of your running backs and receivers, I think it's important to keep that in mind, that it's probably for the best for you to wait at tight end at least a little bit. Maybe you could have gone in on Tucker Kraft instead of Tootin, that type of thing. But don't be in a rush to take your tight end if you go quarterbacks up top. And then we see the team 6 and 7 here, where we kind of waited at quarterback a little bit longer, right? We get Willis in round 5 and Stroud in round 6, but the rest of the team comes together really well, right? You get Puka, Pickens, Tate with Walker and Travis Achan, and Tucker Kraft. I really think that team turned out well and still end up with Herbert and Willis. And then team 6, I think similar build, just with McBride in there. So you can kind of see how if you wait on your second quarterback, it makes it a little bit easier to draft a tight end early. So you end up with Chase, McMillan, and Brian Thomas Jr. with Hampton and Price, but you end up with McBride with Goff and Stroud. So I think if you're going to go in on tight end, that is the build works out best if you wait on your second quarterback. And obviously that applies specifically to these huge rosters, right? If you're in a 12-team league where you're starting 2 quarterbacks and you're starting 3 wide receivers, you just have so many starters to account for that you got to make concessions somewhere. You got to have a strategy and approach on how you want to do it. I think that works out best if you decide to take one of the top tight ends. All right, with that, thank you so much for watching. We look forward to talking to you the next one.